Welcome. We are anonymous. We are legion. United as one. Divided by zero. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Expect us. The world is changing. Is protecting privacy is a losing game today? Recent congressional hearings and data breaches have prompted more legislators and business leaders to say the time for broad federal privacy legislation has come. Kerry presents the case for adoption of a baseline framework to protect consumer privacy in the U.S. Kerry explores a growing gap between existing laws and an information big bang that is eroding trust. He suggests that recent privacy bills have not been ambitious enough, and points to the Obama administration's Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights as a blueprint for future legislation. Kerry considers ways to improve that proposal, including an overarching golden rule of privacy to ensure people can trust that data about them is handled in ways consistent with their interests and the circumstances in which it was collected. More and more data about each of us is being generated faster and faster from more and more devices, and we can't keep up. It's a losing game both for individuals and for our legal system. The Cambridge Analytica drama has been the latest in a series of eruptions that have caught people's attention in ways that a steady stream of data breaches and misuses of data have not. The first of these shocks was the Snowden revelations in 2013. These made for long-running and headline-grabbing stories that shined light on the amount of information about us that can end up in unexpected places. The aftershocks were felt not only by the government, but also by American companies, especially those whose names and logos showed up in Snowden news stories. They faced suspicion from customers at home and market resistance from customers overseas. To rebuild trust, they pushed to disclose more about the volume of surveillance demands and for changes in surveillance laws. Apple, Microsoft, and Yahoo all engaged in public legal battles with the US government. Then came last year's Equifax breach that compromised identity information of almost 146 million Americans. It was not bigger than some of the lengthy roster of data breaches that preceded it, but it hit harder because it rippled through the financial system and affected individual consumers who never did business with Equifax directly but nevertheless had to deal with the impact of its credit scores on economic life. For these people, the breach was another demonstration of how much important data about them moves around without their control, but with an impact on their lives. Now the Cambridge Analytica stories have unleashed even more intense public attention, complete with live network TV cut-ins to Mark Zuckerberg's congressional testimony. Not only were many of the people whose data was collected surprised that a company they never heard of got so much personal information, but the Cambridge Analytica story touches on all the controversies roiling around the role of social media in the cataclysm of the 2016 presidential election. Facebook estimates that Cambridge Analytica was able to leverage its academic research into data on some 87 million Americans, while before the 2016 election Cambridge Analytica CEO Alexander Nix boasted of having profiles with 5,000 data points on 220 million Americans. With over 2 billion Facebook users worldwide, a lot of people have a stake in this issue and, like the Snowden stories, it is getting intense attention around the globe, as demonstrated by Mark Zuckerberg taking his legislative testimony on the road to the European Parliament. The Snowden stories forced substantive changes to surveillance with enactment of U.S. legislation curtailing telephone metadata collection and increased transparency and safeguards in intelligence collection. Will all the hearings and public attention on Equifax and Cambridge Analytica bring analogous changes to the commercial sector in America? I certainly hope so. I led the Obama administration task force that developed the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights issued by the White House in 2012 with support from both businesses and privacy advocates, and then drafted legislation to put this Bill of Rights into law. The legislative proposal issued after I left the government did not get much traction, so this initiative remains unfinished business. The Cambridge Analytica stories have spawned fresh calls for some federal privacy legislation from members of Congress in both parties, editorial boards, and commentators. With their marquee Zuckerberg hearings behind them, senators and congressmen are moving on to think about what to do next. Some have already introduced bills and others are thinking about what privacy proposals might look like. The op-eds and Twitter threads on what to do have flowed. Various groups in Washington have been convening to develop proposals for legislation. This time, proposals may land on more fertile ground. The chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, John Thune, RSD, said many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have been willing to defer to tech companies' efforts to regulate themselves, but this may be changing. A number of companies have been increasingly open to a discussion of a basic federal privacy law. Most notably, Zuckerberg told CNN, "I'm not sure we shouldn't be regulated," and Apple's Tim Cook expressed his emphatic belief that self-regulation is no longer viable. For a while now, events have been changing the way that business interests view the prospect of federal privacy legislation. This is not just about damage control or accommodation to techlash and consumer frustration. For a while now, events have been changing the way that business interests view the prospect of federal privacy legislation. An increasing spread of state legislation on net neutrality, drones, educational technology, license plate readers, and other subjects, and, especially broad new legislation in California preempting a ballot initiative, have made the possibility of a single set of federal rules across all 50 states look attractive. For multinational companies that have spent 2 years gearing up for compliance with the new data protection law that has now taken effect in the EU, dealing with a comprehensive US law no longer looks as daunting. And more companies are seeing value in a common baseline that can provide people with reassurance about how their data is handled and protected against outliers and outlaws. This change in the corporate sector opens the possibility that these interests can converge with those of privacy advocates in comprehensive federal legislation that provides effective protections for consumers. Trade-offs to get consistent federal rules that preempt some strong state laws and remedies will be difficult, but with a strong enough federal baseline, action can be achievable. We are anonymous. Thanks for watching. This audio file was created by Panopreter Basic. You can download it at www.panopreter.com.